All right, how many of y'all, by show of hands, played at some point growing up with Legos? Jeremy's hand, I knew it'd be the first one in the air, right? You love Legos. Great. Let me ask this now, with all of you Lego people. Were you an instruction follower, or were you like, I do what I want, like mix them all up kind of a thing? Both. You're an instruction follower? Are you mixing them up? Yeah. So you follow instructions, you follow instructions. You said a little bit of both, and you too instructions. He's like, you have to say if it's expensive enough, I follow those instructions. That's fair. Interesting. All right. One of the cool things about Legos I've always found is the ability to do either. Right? You can follow the directions and create exactly what's there, or you can begin to mix and match. I often preferred instructions, but there was a couple of times because I felt like the Legos were cool enough that I thought if I combine a few of these, I can create one like super cool thing, right? But I wasn't very like brilliantly minded. So that's the best way I can say that. I had to be careful doing that. And so I would do this with my toys sometimes. I would give, like all of a sudden Superman would have Thor's hammer, you know what I mean? And Batman would have Captain America's shield, and all superheroes could have lightsabers. That was how I played, right? I could mix and match things that clearly didn't belong to make them better, all right? Tonight, we're going to talk about something that gets kind of mixed and matched, things that didn't necessarily belong, that God actually comes in and makes it work and makes it produce something good. And so we're going to kind of dig into that a little bit later, but we're continuing in our series through the book of Romans, which is all about the gospel, which is why we've titled it Salvation 101. It's all about how to be saved. He's writing to the Roman believers who are actually a mixture of Jewish Christians and non-Jewish Christians. And when I say non-Jewish, you'll also hear me say the word Gentile, which really just means non-Jewish. If you're in this room like me and you're not a Jew, congratulations, you're a Gentile, all right? That's us. And so he's writing to a mixture of people like that. He's trying to encourage them and explain the gospel, and he helpfully summarizes it in Romans chapter 1. He says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and also to the Greek, aka Gentile." All right? For in it, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. So turn with me now to Romans 11 with all of that in mind. We're going to be reading verses 11 through 24 tonight, so we won't read the whole chapter of Romans 11. But let me explain some of the context surrounding the passage. We're actually at the end of a long section. Chapters 9 through 11 is all about Israel, all right? It's all about the Jewish non-believers specifically. It's almost like this problem that Paul presents. He says, hey, the gospel is great. It's perfect for salvation, and it's for everybody, and everybody needs it. And wait a minute, why are there so many Jewish people, the chosen people of God, who are not believing the gospel? This presents a problem. And he's walked us through this problem in Romans 9, talking a lot about how this didn't catch God off guard at all. In fact, he's quite prepared for it and is using it for his glory. He talks in Romans 10 about how you become a believer, right? Confessing with our mouth, believing with our heart. And he talks about how this is really how the Gentiles became believers. And then in 11, he's talking about this issue of Israel still. And he's going to talk a lot about, hey, this is going to be okay. This is actually the Israelites' rejection of the gospel, by and large, has created an avenue for Gentile believers like us to become the chosen people of God as well. And a lot of the theme of this chapter is going to be talking about how we are not replacing the Jewish chosen people of God by any means. We have been grafted in as some of the language, right? Kind of like those mixed matched Legos. We've been added into something that wasn't originally there, and it's for our benefit. And then Paul's going to explain that God's not done with Israel. So it's a really unique and interesting passage, and one that it'd be really cool to do a a big and interesting, I don't know, lecture series on it, but I wouldn't want to teach it. I'd want to listen to it, all right? And we're not going to do that here. So we're going to look specifically at verses 11 through 24 as Paul explains that the gospel has not failed, that righteousness comes by faith in Jesus, and he's going to speak further about the relationship in the section we're looking at between those Jewish non-believers and the believing Gentiles, all right? So turn with me, Romans chapter 11. We'll begin in verse 11. We're really going to read the passage tonight in two sections, all right? So bear with me, but here it is. Romans 11, beginning in 11. I ask then, have they being Jewish non-believers, have they stumbled so as to fall? Absolutely not. On the contrary, by their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel jealous. Now, if their transgression brings riches for the world and their failure riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their fullness bring? Now, I am speaking to you Gentiles insofar as I am an apostle to the Gentiles. I magnify my ministry if I might somehow make my own people, remember Paul was an Israelite, if I might somehow make my own people jealous and save some of them. For if their rejection brings reconciliation to the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead? Now, if the first fruits are holy, so is the whole batch. And if the root is holy, so are the branches. He's going to, just a moment, he's going to take that last line and continue that illustration and tease it out, talking about how the Gentiles were grafted in. We'll get there. But essentially, what Paul is suggesting here is that God is not done with Israel, and all of this was on purpose. God is using their rejection that he knew would happen to include the Gentiles, to make a space for you and me. That's what God has done. He says, it's okay. I know it's a rejection. I know it seems like a failure, but it's not, and I'm going to use it for my benefit. I'm going to use it so that we can be included. The plans to use the Gentiles to help. Oh, that's the other thing. He also plans to use the Gentiles to further save Israel, right? He's going to use us because he's not quite done with Israel. Paul wants to magnify his ministry, he says. I want to magnify my ministry in an effort to do what? Did you catch that word? In an effort to make Israel what? You can say it if you know it. Jealous. What? Jealous, Paul? What are you talking about? He wants to produce jealousy in the Israelites. And what he means by that, this word, we kind of think of it differently nowadays, right? We think of jealousy and we're like, ew, it's like you're in a relationship and you like your girlfriend spends too much time with that other guy and you get jealous, right? Like we think of it as this gross emotion. But in this context, he's really talking more like he wants to provoke emulation, right? He wants to provoke this like copying of it. He wants them to see us, right? And be jealous and be like, I want that relationship with God. I want that. That's what he wants to provoke, that kind of jealousy, in order to help save them. If he can provoke them into that jealousy, that desire for the relationship with God that the Gentiles now benefit from, then he's like, hey, look, then they'll be like, oh, maybe this is real. Maybe God really has done something wonderful with the Gentiles, and really it is all about Jesus, and perhaps some of them will then be saved. That's Paul's mindset. It's not the kind of jealousy that's pure envy. Paul wants to provoke this emulation. He wants them to pursue a relationship with Christ like he has. And this is where I think, this is kind of a difficult passage for us, right? Because we're looking at this relationship 2,000 years ago between these Jewish non-believers and Gentile believers. And we're kind of like, what is there for us to learn in this passage, right? We're going to find two application points tonight. And I purposely phrase them like that, application points. They're not the point of the text, but there's something we can draw out of it and learn as we kind of, we're almost like outsiders listening in on this conversation, all right? And so here's that first application point. As we look at Paul wanting to make them jealous, his desire there we can learn from, because here's what we can learn. We should live in such a way as to make unbelievers want what we have with Christ. Our relationship with Christ should be so valuable to us and so visible in us that non-believers look at us and go, wow, what is it that they have? I want it. We want them to be jealous in the sense that they go, hey, how do I get that? I want one of those. You ever, got something really cool for Christmas and you show it off at school and all your friends and your greatest dreams, all your friends are like, I want that, right? Or ever happened to you or your friends get something and so for Christmas that year like, mom, dad, I have to have it. I have to have it, right? I want that. That's the kind of thing that we're wanting to produce in non-believers. We want them to look at us and go, I want that. I want that faith, that peace, that purpose, that hope that all those Christian people keep talking about. That's what we want to provoke. I'm sure you've also heard the phrase, don't try this at home, right? You've heard, and usually what that phrase comes and what happens right after. Well, yeah, spoken by the guys. We try it at home, of course. We blatantly ignore it. No, I mean, when someone says that, what is that person about to do? Something stupid. Spoken from one of the ladies. Something stupid, something dangerous, right? Something that we don't want just every child practicing or attempting, right? It usually is done by a professional or someone practiced in danger. Often this is something cool or exciting, something you know that somebody at home is going to want to try, right? Most likely dudes, clearly. So you have to do something worth emulation, right? Worth copying. I know I'm using that big word tonight. I've been hanging out with Pastor Matthew a lot, sorry. But it's this idea of copying something, right? You have to do something worth somebody actually wanting to copy it for you to dare use the phrase, don't try this at home, right? Like, can you imagine, don't try this at home. I'm scraping peanut butter across bread. And I'd be like, woo, big whoop, right? You want to do something cool, something exciting. The Christian life is, in fact, often a dangerous one. We walk by faith where some people won't walk at all. We ought to be living with such visible faith that people want to know if they can try that at home, if they can live that life. We ought to live lives worth copying. Now, not only do we need to live our lives in a way to make others want the faith we have, but our attitude towards unbelievers is also incredibly important. And it's one of the other application points we're going to pull in just a minute. But let's read on for what Paul has to say about the attitude of Gentile believers towards Jewish, because he's also dealing, in the Church of Rome, he's dealing with this huge issue of a division between their Jewish believers in the church and the Gentile believers in the church. The Jewish people had actually been kicked out of Rome. Kicked out, right? Can you imagine? Can you imagine that for a minute? People walk in, excuse me, you a Jew? Get out. Like, wait, what? That's tragic and horrible, right? That's what happened. They were kicked out for about 5 years, and then they got to come back. Okay, so they come back and they're like, what happened to my church? It looks so different now, right? Well, yeah, it was non-Jewish for 5 years. They didn't do any of the Jewish things, did they? Right? There's probably things in their temple closets that they're like, why is the menorah back there? And they're like, what's that? You know what I mean? That's the kind of problems, the big division problem. I can't imagine that Paul's probably got some of that in the back of his mind as he deals with this issue. Let's keep going. 17 through 24 now. He's continuing this branch idea. Now, some of the branches were broken off, and you, though a wild olive branch, were grafted in among them and have come to share in the rich root of the cultivated olive tree. Do not boast that you are better than those branches, but if you do boast, you do not sustain the root, but the root sustains you. Then you will say, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. Well, true enough, they were broken off because of unbelief, but you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but beware. Because if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Therefore, consider God's kindness and severity. Severity towards those who have fallen, but God's kindness towards you, if you remain in his kindness, otherwise you too will be cut off. And even they, if they do not remain in unbelief, will be grafted in because God has the power to graft them in again. For if you were cut off from your native wild olive tree and against nature were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? Have I lost anybody yet in all of the olive tree talk? Cultivated, grafted, what is he talking? Big words, big words. So here's the image he presents. He presents two olive trees. One is cultivated. In other words, it's producing fruit, it's taken care of. Anybody have plants in their house that their parent goes around and waters? You know what I mean? Anybody have plants in their house that are dead because nobody went and watered them? All right. Good, I've got you. So we've got dead plants, living plants, neglected plants, plants that actually get attention. All right? This is life and death. All right? That's a great illustration of it. But Paul's talking about olive trees in that same concept because they would produce things that you'd want them to, but in the wild, you don't care about it. You don't touch it. So it's not producing anything. It's not being cultivated, taken care of. It's being neglected. He said, that's like the Gentiles. I'm going to break branches off of here, and I'm going to come over here to this fruitful tree. I'm going to break branches off of here. I'm going to throw those away. I'm going to take these crazy wild branches. I'm going to put them and graft them in, bind them into this tree so that they get to benefit from the life of that tree, which is contrary against nature. Clearly not, that didn't happen that way naturally, but also it's not the practice back then. They wouldn't practice like that at all. They would do the exact opposite. They would take live branches from here and put them over here in an effort to save the whole tree. So we get this very strange image from Paul. What are you talking about, Paul? Right? He says, this is like the Jewish people who have stopped believing, those who have stopped believing, the branches being broken off, and he takes the believing Gentiles who have no business believing, but yet they do. He breaks those off and he brings them over here and connects them to the tree of life. We call that grafting them in, that the branches might benefit from this root. It's a pretty exciting and interesting thing. And he keeps going and he says, look, it's kind of like these branches that got grafted in have a attitude problem all of a sudden, right? He gives these commands that hint at this attitude problem, which is really quite silly. So he says, do not boast, which, by the way, boast in this language here, the context here is like triumph over, all right? Like gladiatorial games. How many of you guys play first-person shooter games, right? Don't we have a whole system in those first-person shooter games where you can gloat at somebody when what are they called? You know what I'm talking about? What did you say? Emotes, right? You can throw all these emotes and just brag at somebody. That's exactly the concept that he's talking about. I know it's weird, but that's exactly the concept he's talking about. Boasting, it's this triumphant ha, I've won over and against you. He says, look, that's some of the attitudes that he's finding, and that's stupid. Did the branch do anything to connect itself to that tree? No, right? It just purely benefits. The branch had nothing to do with it, right? So he says, you can't boast. The root is sustaining the branch, not the other way around. There's nothing to boast over. So he says, don't be arrogant, which is the attitude that is at the root of boasting, right? Arrogance, this pridefulness, this I'm better, right? Well, certainly we can take some application in that, right? Because we're good Christian believers. We're better than those people who don't believe. We're better than those people who don't act like Christians, right? Well, that's a terrible attitude to have towards non-believers. It's horrible. It's deadly. You don't create new believers with that attitude, right? We don't look at the lost in the world and say, we've beaten them. I can't wait. I'm going to be in heaven and they're going to be in hell. Ha ha ha. That's not at all the attitude of a Christian believer. A Christian believer sees those people as lost people who are just as they were and in need of redemption. So he says, don't boast, don't be arrogant. Instead, fear. Or the CSB in some of your texts will have translated beware. I love that. Beware, caution, warning sign. Don't go this way, right? Beware. Because God does not favor Gentiles over the Jews. That's a huge mistake we can make in the church sometimes, is that, we are better than those Jewish people across that big sea because we have Christ. It doesn't make us better, right? It's got nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with us. So that's not something that we should take a lot of pride in. You see what I'm saying? Because it should create this humility instead. God has allowed us in when he already had a chosen people and he's made a way for us. That should cause humility and gratitude. We should beware that arrogance, that pride. And he says consider, which is like see or take notes, right? It's one of those things where, hey, look, listen here, take notes on this. This is important. That's that word. Consider God's kindness and God's severity. That severity, that kind of firm decisiveness. Anyone ever like asked your parents for something and you get this just like stout, quick answer and you're like, I'm not even going to ask again because that's not going to go anywhere. You know what I'm talking about? You get the hard no. It's not like we'll talk about it later. Or, I don't know. It's no. And you're like, yes, sir. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to bark up that tree. That's that severity, right? And God can make decisions like that. Did you know that? That the God of all of the things can make cold-hearted decisions like that? He can. He's God. Fun fact, God can do what God wants. So he is severity, but he's also kind. Another way of thinking about this is God is all loving, but he is also all just, right? He cares about right and he cares about wrong. These are the commands that he gives. These are the only imperatives in this text, which means he's commanding these Gentile believers against this attitude of pride over against the Jewish people, even though many of them are not believing. Why? Because salvation doesn't produce that in us. Salvation should produce humility in us, not pride. Pride is one of the most deadliest, if not the deadliest sin you could welcome into your life. If you want to kill your faith quickly, you want to kill your friendships quickly, let pride into your life. That'll do it quickly. But salvation doesn't lead us there. That's abnormal. That's foreign. Instead of living in pride over being saved, stand by faith. He says you're in this only because of faith, and you're going to have to continue to walk by faith. We'll probably talk a lot about that in the next coming chapters. This idea of we're not just saved by faith, we continue to walk by faith. That's where we live by faith. We remain in God's love. Our status as being saved is not a static thing. It's put us in a relationship with God where he calls us to walk with him. It's kind of a journey. He takes us places. Fun fact, you start following God, he might take you places and you might not always like where you're going. Anyone ever like get forced to go with their parents somewhere and they're like, I don't want to go there. You don't have a choice. Get in the car. You know what I mean? You give your life over to God, great. You have this all-loving, wonderful God who adores you. Get in the car. You know what I mean? You better follow God. That's part of this life with the Lord. But we're not supposed to be producing pride. Let me think about it this way. You ever helped your parents do something that your parents could have done on your own? Right? They're totally capable, right? I felt this a few times when I was a kid helping my dad with something, most notably the Christmas lights. Guess what my job was while Dad put up Christmas lights? I was to help him, but what was my job? Holding the ladder, exactly. Now, could he do that without me holding the ladder? Absolutely. I've done it myself because I don't have a kid that's old enough to hold the ladder for me, right? And as soon as Madeline's tall enough, boy golly, right? but right now, no one holds the ladder for me. And you know what? I live every year. I put up the Christmas lights and I take them down and I'm fine. But I would help my dad with this and I would try to help steady the ladder. But would it sound pretty silly if after the Christmas lights are up, I'm like telling all the neighbors, look what I did. See those pretty lights? I put those up there, right? You'd all be like, dude, your dad did that, right? You held the ladder. Like, come on. Maybe you put the clips on the lights. You know, like you didn't do anything. Your dad did that. That would be absurd. It's also absurd to take credit for salvation away from God and assign it to ourselves when we did nothing. He's the one who saved us. We didn't save ourselves. So this ought to produce a humble gratitude, not a pride over and against somebody who's not saved. That's an application point we can take from this. If we feel a triumph over others who are not saved, we're not feeling the compassion that Jesus has for them. And he warns, Paul's talking here about this larger issue, right? And he's like, look, God ain't done with Israel, and he can graft them back in if he wants. So quit bragging, quit boasting. So Paul goes on to talk a lot about God's love for his chosen Israelites in the rest of the chapter, and how God will one day save more of them through faith in Jesus Christ. He's going to use us to help lead to that place. And after a while, he says it's going to be time, and a lot more Israelites are going to come to faith in Jesus. And it's going to be wonderful. But for now, we can find ourselves helping with the task by hoping, like Paul, to magnify our ministry and live lives which draw people to Christ. Or we can hurt that ministry by being prideful, leading people away from Jesus by acting like we're better than them, treating them like enemies. Don't fall into that trap. There's a lot of Christians out there, some of them famous, some of them are really well known, some of them you'll see across your YouTube feed, who want that mentality that we're better than lost people. We're not. God has saved you and he wants to save them. Be a part of the mission. Get in the car, right? Tonight, I want us all to examine our life. Corey's going to come up and sing one more song for us as we get ready to close. But examine your life. If it's not where it ought to be, right? If your life's not where it needs to be so that it produces an interest in the lives of others for what you have, make some changes this week. Say, I want to get through this week and I want people to know it. You know, we played this wonderful experiment a few weeks ago in our college growth group class, or I put our college students on trial, which is always fun, right? And I'd be like, all right, I think Connor was the first one I did, right? You were there. I was like, Connor's on trial. Who can give any evidence to tell me he's Christian, right? And so the other guys in the class start, okay, well, before class started, he was talking about staying up late to read his Bible. Sounds pretty Christian to me. You know what I mean? That's the kind of, those are fun experiments to think through, but think that through. Would people look at your life and think, oh, clearly a Christian? Yeah. And not only that, would they look at your life, clearly a Christian and happy to be so? Why are they so calm? Why are they so hopeful? Why are they so joyful? I want that. If your life isn't worth copying, take some time this week to change some things up. Ask the Lord to change your life. That's a bold prayer, but it's a necessary one at times. If you've never given your life to Christ, now's a great time to do that. You're one of those branches broken off, and I tell you what, unless you get connected to that tree of life, you are dead, and you're not going anywhere. You can have all the grandest plans for your life that you want. It won't matter. But the Lord has graciously offered. He has made a special way for us to be connected to him. Choose to make that decision, to believe we saw that in Romans 10 last week. Confess Jesus as Lord, believe God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. It's so simple to begin a relationship with God, and he'll change your world. If you want to talk more about that tonight, I'm going to be available so other leaders come visit with us. You're going to have time afterwards. Come visit with us. Talk to us about it. We'd love to talk to you more. However the Lord calls you to respond, I want you to do so tonight. When we delay response, we're way less likely to respond. Obediently, that is. So don't delay. Why don't you stand with me? Let me pray for us, and you respond as you need to. Let's pray.